Hi everyone, welcome back to another session of 8X Pixel 360 Virtual Expo, the April series. So I'm extremely excited about today's session. We're joined once again by David Strike together with Christina Zanato. So before we begin, let me quickly introduce the two of them. So David Strike is a former instructor, trainer, and certifier with a background in military, commercial, recreational, and technical diving. David has authored several hundred dive-related articles and is the 8X ambassador for technical diving. He's also the recipient of the 8X Lifetime Achievement Award and the fellow of the Explorers Club of New York. So our guest Christina is an ocean cave explorer and shark behaviorist, photographer, speaker, writer, and conservationist. A member of the Women's Divers Hall of Fame and the Explorers Club, she is a firm believer in the power of education and spends her time teaching below and above the water. She has conducted the exploration and surveys of numerous new cave systems and is the first person to ever connect an entrance on land with an open ocean blue hole. She is the founder of the nonprofit People of the Water, organized to widen the distribution of training, education, and research related to the ocean and environmental issues. So now I'll pass it over to David to begin this fantastic session. David, the floor is yours.
Kushi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We shall speak to you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina, it's lovely to catch up with you again.
It is, David. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Last time that we spoke, it was on a panel session, so we really didn't have chance to, for want of a better term, go into detail about your life and work and achievements. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. Where do you come from, Christina?
I am originally from Italy,
Right.
and I grew up in Central Africa because of my father's and mother's jobs. And I moved to the Bahamas 28 and a half years ago.
Really?
Yes.
And you've stayed there ever since?
I've stayed here ever since. I came here on vacation on a series of coincidences and choices to learn how to scuba dive. I was 22 years old. I always had a passion for scuba diving, and I could never find the correct time and place to do it in Italy. So I went to the travel agency and I said, well, I want to become a scuba diver. And they said, and I gave them this list, which was very natural from Italy, the Red Sea, the Maldives, and nothing was available. So they shipped me here.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh, should I?
No, you can laugh. It was just like,
had you?
I didn't even know about the Bahamas. I'd never heard about that. It was
Actually,
not on my radar.
Because perhaps a lot of people may not be familiar with exactly where the Bahamas are. Can you describe where they are?
The Bahamas is an archipelago of over, we say 700, but it's over 3,000 between islands, small islands and keys. And it basically stretches from if you imagine the southern tip of Florida, so we're like my island, Grand Bahama, is 39 miles of east of the coast of Florida, all the way down almost to the top of what begins to be the Caribbean, so into the Turks and Caicos. And we're like this little littered of like tiny little islands and keys and sandbanks. So some are inhabited, some are not. There's about 300 where you find people that live on.
Yeah. Are you sorry, you're a resident there. Are you naturalized as a Bahamian?
Yes, I am. Yes. After I was finally able to naturalize my position here after about 20 years.
Right. So that makes it easy for living there and working, obviously.
That's correct. At first, I was with a work permit, and I was what you will call an employee of a company. And now I am actually capable of being an independent person and work on my own.
So sorry, back to the very beginning, because your life is absolutely fascinating, because it just seems to me it's divided between these two extremes. One is sharks, and the other one is, of course, caves. And the linking factor is the diving, the equipment, the fact that you're so highly trained. So let's just go back. You went to the Bahamas to learn how to scuba dive. What happened after you learned how to scuba dive?
I was immediately captivated by scuba. I was before that, my family is a family from the ocean, so I always grew up with fins, masks, snorkel. The most exciting part of my life was when the summer came and we had to buy new fins because I had to fit my growing feet. And I was captivated by the underwater world here, the visibility, and the fact that they had sharks. And so I remember asking, so, okay, now what? The answer was like, well, you go back, you work for another 6 months to a year, you take your next vacation. I was just like, yeah, I don't think so. So I speak 5 languages, and I found a job in a resort that needed international languages, primarily Italian, French, that could be related to the English language of this country. And I said, well, hotel business management is my background. I'll stay and work at the front desk. And that's what I did. I went home, and in 12 days, I quit my job. I packed my stuff in boxes. I gave the car back to my parents, and I told my boyfriend, I said, I'll be back in a year. And I came back to the Bahamas within a week after my vacation and started working. And as I did that, I started diving and diving and diving and diving. And I was just told, I said, well, why don't you stay into the diving business? And so I did the little transition. I was like, okay, I'll do the diving and I'll travel the world with the diving. But like you said, there were 2 pools here. There were the sharks, so easily accessible, and there were the caves, also so easily accessible. And it was just like, where else do I find this? Right? I found the 2 things that I really loved, and I was not, and it's not to ditch anything else, but for me, the idea was like, okay, I'm going to the Maldives. Yes, it's pretty seas with a lot of fish, but there was these 2 elements missing. And I ended up staying here and just building up my experience. I still travel to other places, but I still travel to go and visit people that are either cave diving, different kind of caves, different techniques, technical diving. So I've been from the Channel Islands to the Thousand Islands in Canada to the Nullarbor Desert in Australia, and with sharks. I will find people that work with sharks in different parts of the world. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go here. And I met, Walter Bernardis as well as Mike Rutson, or went to Rhode Island to free dive with makos and blue sharks, to Fiji to work with bull sharks, to see how other people did it. But I stayed based
sorry
here.
to cut across, but how did you become so interested so relatively quickly in your diving career with sharks and caves, or had that interest always been there?
No, the interest for caves was not there. The interest for sharks was there as a childhood dream to be an underwater scuba ranger who would have sharks for friends. So my imaginary job was to be swimming around the oceans for 8 to 10 hours a day without my mom telling me, you need to come out of the water because your lips are purple, and tell people what to do and what not to do. I imagine my cousin was a forest park ranger in Italy. And
Right.
so my idea was like, well, I'm going to be an underwater park ranger, and I will have sharks for friends. So sharks were something of my imaginary because of the ocean. Caves, I never thought about them, but thanks to a gentleman called Ben Rose, and Ben Rose was my inspiration, my mentor, someone that in a certain way became family through the years. He was the one that had started the shark diving here, and he was the one that actually took me on my first cavern dive. My 11th log dive ever is a cavern tour in Ben's cavern, and I remember being in that cavern absolutely mind blown by the beauty of it. I was captivated by the caverns at the time. It would take me about 2 years more to then go and become a cave diver. But the sharks,
they're sort of named after Ben, were they, the caves?
Ben's cave,
yeah.
yes, is named after Ben because it was not the first person that knew about them. The Lucayans knew about the cave, but he was the first person that in 1967, the foreground of scuba diving thought it would be a great idea to go scuba diving in an overhead underwater environment. So it was named after him because he was the first person to venture into that overhead.
Right.
He never got to explore the caves. The caves were explored by a different series of cave explorers, including Sheck Exley, Tom Mount, Dennis Williams, Mary Brooks, Jean Melton. All those people were actually the explorers of this system, but it was named after him because he decided to go and actually be the first one to venture underground on the water. We're talking about 1967. So I was introduced with these two worlds, and I was just like, they were both for me fascinating, interesting, beautiful. Neither of them scared me. And so I started cultivating both of them on a parallel level.
And you've done exceedingly well with both of them. With the
Thank you.
with the sharks, you went to the Bimini lab. You were an intern there.
I did. Yes, I did. Like I said, I would travel and find locations that worked with sharks or did something with sharks that would interest me and enrich what I was doing. So yes, I interned. They had a program. It's like a citizen science program.
Right.
And you can join and do like internships and stay there and see what they do and assist with basic work of let's say capturing sharks. I don't want to really want that word, but like measuring sharks. So there were always different scientists at the lab that are doing different research. At the time I was there was actually two scientists that were working on shark repellent. And so they were working on the concept of like, if you use the ammonia secreted by a species of sharks, that ammonia keeps the sharks away. So they were trying to think about something that you can dissolve into the water around you so that the other sharks will go, oh, I don't like that. That was one of the research they were doing. And then obviously we're doing baby lemons locations research. We're talking about, my goodness, I don't want to date myself, but like almost 20 years ago, 2003. So yeah, 19 years ago. And then I visited the Bimini Shark Lab several times afterwards. It was one of the many places. I went to South Africa to see how they dealt with the great whites. So ended up, like I said, in Rhode Island. I did La Jolla in California with the kelp forest with the 7 gills. I did I'm trying to think here on the top of my head. Like I said, I did several weeks in Fiji.
What sort of sharks do you have in the Bahamas then? What are the usual sort of varieties that you see there?
The sharks that we primarily do dives with, like across the Bahamas, are, I would say, the most famous one. I strictly and usually work with Caribbean ray sharks, but we do structure dives with Caribbean, bull sharks, tiger sharks, great hammerheads, and oceanic whitetip. So those are the kind of like the stars of the shows. And then we have
Sorry,
lemons.
Excuse my jaw dropping open there. These are the sort of acknowledged man-eaters, aren't they?
Yes, unfortunately people label them like that, but they're not. And that is a funny part. And it was an evolution. I remember when I started diving here, it was unheard of being able to go scuba diving with tiger sharks. And then slowly it evolved here on Grand Bahama Island off Tiger Beach on being able to go scuba diving with tiger sharks.
So as a shark behaviorist, what do you actually learn? What do you actually do as a shark behaviorist? You have to study the characteristics of each individual type of shark?
Correct. So that is maybe the number one lesson that I try to bring forward to the public is one size does not fit all. We tend to gather sharks into this one name, and I try to explain to people saying sharks is like saying birds. You can't sit there and say all birds can fly, all birds are beautifully colored, and all birds can sing. There's birds that don't fly. There's birds that are black or black and white, and there's birds that definitely you don't want to listen to their singing. And we do understand that even if we're not ornithologists, But with sharks, it's like we go into this, oh, you know, like the traditional questions. Oh, what do I do if I see a shark in the water? Or what do I do to avoid a shark attack? And so I tell people, it's like, well, the shark starts at this size. This is the size of a fully grown lantern dwarf shark. So the question that applies to this shark does not apply to a tiger shark, nor applies to a whale shark, which is the biggest fish in the ocean. Yeah. But the three of them are so completely different. So as a shark behaviorist is understanding the behavior of each species, and sometimes actually understanding that the behavior of each species differ from location. The great whites of South Africa behave differently than the great whites of Guadeloupe because of the conditions that they're in. Yeah. So trying to transmit this message that one size does not fit all, nor one thing you can say works across the board.
How do you actually sort of study then all of the different types? Do you sort of apprentice yourself to someone living in those various areas, or
some of it,
or do
yes.
you just observe and study yourself?
Well, that's the thing. I first started off by working with that specific species, and there was not really much to apprentice from when I started. I am the one that people apprentice themselves from, if that makes sense. Like I will go and visit other people working with different types of sharks and listen to what they had to say about working with the sharks, and watching the sharks in the water. And then with the knowledge that I had of like the specific species that I work with, then start noticing the different behaviors. But I think most of it is the time spent in the water. There's nothing on behavior that you can learn unless you are in direct contact with the animals. It's what I call dive site fidelity. And that is with any animal. You like, if you, let's say you're a dog trainer, you can learn, you can watch a couple of videos, you can intern a little bit, but the best way to learn a dog is to have the leash in your hand and actually work with the animal. And it's the same thing with shark behavior. Is you have to go in the water. What I facilitate now with people is what I call myself the shortcut. So people can come in the water with me, and we watch something, and I said, did you notice that? We will observe this. So this is what happens. And I give hints and shortcuts into the behavioral observation. So instead of for them to spend 20 years trying to figure it out, we can figure it out, or they can start having a glimpse of it within 2 to 5 dives.
Yeah. What with the equipment? I mean, you're an instructor, trainer in CCRs, closed circuit rebreathers. So is that more helpful dealing with sharks, closed circuit, than open circuit apparatus?
We go back to the first lesson. It depends on the shark species. So some shark species, so some shark species are traditionally best observed in CCR. Some shark species become very territorial when you're in a CCR. My Caribbean reef sharks, my Caribbean meaning the shiver that I work with, they actually are very defensive of their territory when I showed up into closed circuit. They're so used to the divers and to the bubbles, where they go, okay, I know you have bubbles, you're like this foreign entity, you're not threatening, you can swim through, no problem. And when I was testing my side mount, my KISS Sidewinder, when I first tried it out, I'm a kind of person that believes in no new. So I'm like, well, I have a brand new machine. I'm going to go in the easiest dive that I know, which is 40 feet, 12 meters out there on the open ocean, right? That is the easiest place to use your rebreather when you're new to it. And the sharks did not like it. They were coming in and they were just being completely territorial. They start pushing, they start coming in with like this kind of behavior. And so I had my dill and I had the entire side mount. And at a certain point, I started pressing the button of my alternate air source, simulating like an exhalation bubbles. And all of a sudden they went, whew. And then there's sharks that actually you want the rebreather with, like hammerheads are known to be less scared, wild hammerheads less scared by bubbles than they are by known presence of bubbles.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always help. Again, is species specific. Silkies are known to be very intense in a presence of rebreather divers. They become, again, very territorial.
Right.
And I think it's because they persevere this big shark into their territory. I watched the Caribbean reef shark chasing tiger sharks and great hammerheads from our site. Literally chasing them, charging into them and say, get out of here. This is not your place, go. And then I watched the Caribbean reef sharks in different areas interacting or sharing the space with bull sharks and tiger sharks.
Yeah.
This is off the coast of Grand Bahama, different location, different Caribbean reef sharks, different behaviors just in 2 different dive sites.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Hey, so while you were so in between dealing with the sharks and progressing your own sort of diving knowledge and experience with equipment, so you're now heavily involved in technical diving, for want of a better term, with the closed circuit, which is obviously an asset in terms of the cave exploration. You're also doing cave exploration at the same time in the Bahamas.
That's correct. It sometimes is hard to convey, but basically I lived the life where I dived I did dive for a living. And then when I had time off, I continued to dive and I continued to grow and I continued to do things on the side.
Right.
So I could be in the water for 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 weeks in a row without taking one dry day, for example. And it kind of like, I try to explain, I do quite a lot of mentorships now to young people, younger people in their 1920s and mid-20s. And they're like, I want a career. What do I do? And I try to tell them, so you need to grow horizontally, not just vertically. And I think that's what I was doing. You know, I was doing the sharks and I was traveling and I was checking on the sharks. And then I was spending a copious amount of time in the water in a certain way doing the same thing over and over and over again. But that brings that dive site fidelity and experience. And then I went cave diving, and then I went working on my cave capabilities, and then I went and travel over to different places to go and experience new caves, meet other cave instructors. I kind of like suffered a little bit. I always kind of like was the quote unquote the top dog on this island. So I will come back and I'm the only full cave diver on the entire island, and it's just kind of like, well, that doesn't really help. So everybody's coming to me and I'm kind of like, I need someone above me so I can learn from. So I always went and sought after more experienced people that I could go and learn from. And then sometimes equally experienced people, but you can still learn from. A neighboring island, you have a conversation, Brian K. Cook. Yeah. I mean, a guru of cave diving. And to this day, you could say we're somewhat equal, but in a certain way for me is just every time you go over, you talk about something and there's a different point of view. Ed Sorensen for rebreather diving, Florida caves, even just Harry Averill was one of my biggest mentors for that. Lamar Hires from Dive Right. Yeah. And you absorb all these different parts. And even if now you can say, well, we're somewhat equal, there's always something to pick from someone else, because they're diving a different cave, or they had a different experience with their gear, or they come up with a different solution. And so my idea is there's never a time where you can say, well, I've learned it all. And that's what I love about this, is I'm always seeking someone else.
What's the big attraction for you with caves? Is it to see where they eventually lead, or is it for want of a better term, the decor inside the cave?
All of it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, first of all, they're gorgeous, each in their own way. And I'm not talking about just the crystal caves or the clear visibility. I actually have a little passion for the dark, hazy caves. The one with the hydrogen sulfide, what we call the cave not. I love the one with microbial growth. So, but what do the caves can teach us? Where do they lead? There is a geological history of this planet is written in these walls, is written in every single part. So there's the part of the exploration, which is, I think, part of the human race. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we did not have this engraved passion for finding what if, what's next. You know, sometimes I sit there and I'm thinking, who came up with the idea that toasting these things and then grinding and then passing hot water through it will give the most sought after potion in the world for me, right?
Yeah.
And so the human mind does that. And so cave diving for me is just to imagine myself being in a library and open this big book. And then I cave dive and associated with the health of our planet. Jill Heiner is the one that says, I swim through the veins of Mother Earth.
Yes.
And it's so true. And I actually relate to that, because I say, if you think about it, right, what you eat, what you put inside your stomach will, if it's correct, will give you fairly good health. If it's incorrect, you end up with obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol. And it's the same with this planet. What we do on the surface of a planet is what we make this planet ingest. It actually shows itself through the circulatory system, which are the caves system. So down there now, it's not only the beauty, but it's also what it was, what it is, and what it can be, and what are we doing to this planet. And then there's a sense, like I said, of discovery. It's just like, you know, with that, as with the rebreather, and you have the Rio, it has the little scratchy sound as you run it. I absolutely adore the sun as you deploy it, you know. And the satisfaction of cave diving for me is 90% failures and 10% success in a way. And the failures, though, are the one that teach you, is like, do persist. You know, I remember when I was trying to connect the land cave with the ocean blue hole, I was always coming in from the ocean blue hole. And at a certain point, my exploration got to a stop, and I kept getting to an area and going, okay, this is the way, and then come back and bite my own line again. I was just like, And then one day I got to the same place, and I looked at this wall, and it was just like, that's not a wall. That is a rock that actually did this, clunk. And so I swam up to the rock, literally put my head against the rock and looked sideways. And between the cave and the rock, there was the side passage. And I crawled through it. And I went on the other side, and it was just like, the cave that then led me to the connection. So it's also that it's like a challenge that makes you understand, is like, a failure is not the end of. Failure is the beginning of. Is I try again, do it again, because that's how you learn. Is through the failure, then you're like, I know where the cave goes. I know what she's doing. I say the cave speaks to me. But in order to listen to its language, you have to dive it over and over and over again. That's the reason a lot of caves that were explored by people like Sheikh Hexley and Tom Mount, and have laid here on this island for 30 years. I went back to it, and in 2019 deployed another 6,000 feet of line in a cave that had been deemed explored, that had been done.
So,
I've been in it
sorry,
so
how
long.
much extra line did you lay?
We have 6,000 feet, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers, just in Bent's Cave alone. And then we did another 8,000 in an old Freetown system, which is a system that has been known since 1984. And then in 2020, my husband and I discovered 2 brand new caves, like 2 complete new entrances, and deployed about 30 kilometers between the 2 systems on this island alone. And again, this island, I had so many people coming through, so many like famous and accomplished cave explorers, and never noticed these 2 entrances. So we actually have about over a dozen entrances of caves that we have discovered.
Yeah.
And these two are the most extensive, and the other ones, maybe they're in a few 100 feet here and there.
And you're actually mapping as well, a lot of these.
Yes, we did map it. Right now we're on a hold because we have a new permitting system that we're trying to sort out. But up to basically the end of 2020,
Right.
somewhat in the middle of 2021, we have basically explored, identified, mapped, and collected data. We're also doing interactive map, which is super fun. You basically grab your camera and swim down the line and follow the line as you do the video. And then you come home, and in a software designed by Sebastian Kister, you overlap the map with the video. And so then I can give you a tablet, right? And I can actually click on the map, and there's like little stations. And as this circle moves along the map, behind it, there's a video. And so you're swimming down the cave as you're looking at the video.
Wow.
Yeah, as you can
that
tell,
would be superb.
Yeah, as you can tell, one of the most important things for me is, sometimes we say it takes a village to raise a child, but I feel that I am the product of the diving world village. There's all these extraordinary people that I've tapped into, and I've been able to, Sebastian Kister comes out with Nemo. There's a professor, Dr. Patricia Beddoes, has the flow meters. I go to Brian and I capture something, and obviously I build onto myself as well. But to me, that was like one of the biggest part of the scuba diving. It was really these gatherings of like-minded people with like-minded passion. If you spend time with any of these people, they are dedicated individuals that live as much underwater as I do, and is one of the, I think, most important parts of who we are as a community.
And you've been recognized in a number of areas for the work that you've done. So you're a member of the Women's Divers Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Explorers Club, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been asked to apply for the Royal Explorers Club in the UK. I just have the paperwork there and just left it dormant. For me, they're very honorable positions, as they're very rewarding. But what they have allowed me to do, especially the Women Diver Hall of Fame, is actually to pay it forward. I'm actually part of the mentorship program for the Explorers Club. So I have like a year mentorship with one of the, they select the person to pair with you. I'm part of the mentorship program for the Women Diver Hall of Fame. I also host for the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society.
I was about to say, yes, that was another.
And then I do mentorships on the island for local people.
Right. And you still get time to travel.
Yes, it's a balance. The last 2 years, obviously, no, I didn't travel much.
No.
But yes, I had the opportunity to travel. I think my last trip was January 2020, when I traveled to North Florida to sanction my rebreather instructor training, basically. And then after that, we went into lockdown. So,
as a trainer, you're qualified in a whole host. You're a PADI course director, a full cave instructor.
Advanced cave, actually. I can do
advanced cave. Sorry.
Yeah.
An EFR, the emergency first response instructor, which is
trainer,
obviously an excellent one to have. TDI, extended range instructor. A KISS rebreather instructor. My goodness me. How many, just as a matter of interest, how many closed circuits units have you used, or do you
honestly,
stick with the KISS?
I only, my first experience, so I actually approached the closed circuit units very late into my career. And the reason why, up to when the KISS came out with, I would say, mainstream side mount units, the rebreather was not of interest because the caves here in the Bahamas are primarily side mount, and most of the entrances and a lot of the passageways. And I looked into all sorts of rebreathers, but most of them were too cumbersome to benefit my cave dive. And I believe that what we use as gear, it's a tool. So I didn't want to just go on a rebreather to say, hey, look at me, I'm on a rebreather. It's like, what am I going to use the rebreather in the Bahamas? You know, what, in 15 meters of water? Now our maximum depth on caves in the open ocean is 30 meters. It had no concept for me. I've never been one for the deep. I've never been one for, you know, just going off the continental shelf. That's not my thing. My thing was overhead. And so the rebreathers did not fulfill my requirement for gear. So for years, I was an open circuit. When I was mapping the back of bends, I was carrying 6 tanks. I was muling tanks and carrying 6 tanks on open circuit because I could have not reached there in a rebreather. So no, I'm a late child to rebreathers. I did my first training on the experimental blue topaz, the prism, before he became the Hollis prism, the military unit. I did a training on the military unit. It was beautiful, but it was like carrying a little mini fridge on my back. I was just like, adorable. What am I going to do with it? And then, no, I specifically went into the KISS Sidewinder because I looked at it and it's like, this is the tool for the job. I'm a little bit unique like that. I don't go into something just because maybe I should go. I had people saying, well, you're not a technical diver because you're not a rebreather diver. I'm like, well, you know, I carry those 6 tanks and do a few hours decompression. I consider myself still very technical. But only the day I saw, and I remember the sidekick had come out already, but the sidekick was still not triggering my when I saw the Sidewinder, is love at first sight. I mean, it was just absolutely love at first sight. And the Sidewinder has changed my exploration and my capabilities.
Yeah.
Technology, when used correctly, when used with training and we use it with the correct attitude, does help.
And just back to the sharks again now. So the sharks have got used to you using the CCR, or some of them have. You also, I remember seeing a picture some while ago of the number of hooks that you'd taken out of the jaws of sharks. That's sort of beggars belief almost, doesn't it? That someone would actually sort of.
To me, so I removed over 300 hooks to date.
Wow.
Removing hooks from the jaws of sharks, it's the same concept for me than removing a thorn from a dog's paw.
Yes.
It had a personal affiliation with the shiver of sharks that I work with and watching them struggling with the hooks in their mouth. And I started removing them, not right away. Again, it took time to get to know the animals, to realize what they were doing, what would happen when I pull on the hook. A lot of people expect the sharks to actually turn around and bite, like if you're trying to help a wild animal that is trapped into a trap. If you try to open the trap from their legs, they'll turn around and bite. Well, the sharks actually will run away. But once I started removing the hooks, what I did not realize is the powerful messages that are given to people. And it was like sharks are living, breathing, feeling creatures, and they actually feel pain and they suffer from our presence. And so for me, it's a personal favor that I do to these animals I care about, but then they became ambassadors for a lot of other animals out there. And I've been invited in many places in the world to speak and to assist into changing the ways. And for me, it's very important to be invited by the people there are from that country to say, hey, Christina, we really want to change the ways we are doing things here. Can you please come as our guest and help us? Because I believe the local people need to do the talking in their own language to their own people in a manner that is comprehensible.
And you've actually sort of helped initiate a number of protection plans, haven't you, in various places? How many?
About 4 like main ones.
Right.
The biggest ones was in 2009. The shark populations in the Bahamas, it was really healthy. We already had an established shark tourism, and all of a sudden some fisheries of the world kind of like turned their attention to the Bahamas, and they went, ooh, reach a shark population, may we come in and fish? And I started with a friend of mine, Pedro Baranda and Eddie Rafael, a petition that then I promoted on my social media. And we're talking about 2009. I collected 25,000 signatures, which doesn't sound like much in 2022, but social media was not what it is now.
Yeah.
And then this 25,000 signatures petition was requested by the Bahama National Trust, which is our local NGO, and the Pew organization. And they used it to continue the campaign. And in 2011, the Bahamas declares their territory a shark sanctuary. I was then invited in Singapore for the I'm Finished with Fins campaign, which were they're using primarily local famous people, and they invited 4 foreigners. David Dubélé was part of it. Wyland, myself, and I do apologize for the 4th person, I can't remember. And the concept was to put basically something in front of your mouth that represented your work. And so I had the chainmail glove, and I'm like this. And the campaign was I'm Finished, Fin, fin with fins, and is like a campaign to reduce the consumptions of shark fin soup. And that campaign alone had a reduction about 33% of shark fin consumption in the places where it actually went out. So
Right.
very much an awareness campaign. I ended up in Mexico helping out with organizing, a little bit better their shark dives, and understanding, like the relationship between doing shark dives and the safety that you need to consider. There's 3 safeties you have to consider. You have to consider the safety of the people involved in the shark dives, the safety of the people that are still there, maybe when they're not doing the shark dives, and then the safety of the sharks. And so how do you balance and manage all of that? So my shark behaviorist works into a lot of that. It's like one size does not fit all. So whatever you do needs to take in consideration these 3 moving parts. So that it can,
South Africa as well. You work there with sharks?
I didn't work. I went and visited and had the opportunity to observe a totally different way of shark diving. I primarily was a great white cage diving, went in a kelp forest, didn't see any sharks, but it was just like, again, watching what they did, how the sharks behave also in their natural environment. So we spent some days also on the boat, just sitting on the boat, watching the sharks, which was very, very unique. At the time, we're talking about 2000, I ended up on a boat with who will become a very famous person later in his life, Mike Ratson. And at the time he was a skipper on that boat. But it was very, for me, I remember sitting on this boat and listening to him. And if I looked away and listened, I was just kind of like, I'm listening to a great white shark talking. It was just really, it was really funny. At the time, he was not famous. Andre Hartman was way, way more famous. And I remember sitting here, it's like, this dude really knows these sharks. He really had this, and he'd be like, we clicked as we really understood the same way. He'll be like saying, today is a cloudy day, and the shadows that we cast on the water and the color of the water will keep the sharks away from the boat, and they will just do this, but they will not do that. And he was spot on. And I was just like, okay, all right, I understand that. And then the next day was like, okay, the weather is like this, the color is this, the sun is out. Oh, let's try to make the sharks, see if they do this behavior. And
gosh.
Again, time at sea. He had spent a lifetime at sea with animals, and nothing in a certain, that, David, a lot of this, but even caves and cave exploration and understanding and knowledge comes with time. And it's normal. You can know at 22 what you know at 50 after spending 30 years in the water. You can't.
That's true. I look forward to being 50.
Me too.
So while you were in South Africa, we started to talk about this earlier. Did you you went on the sardine run?
I did the sardine run on a later date,
Oh,
years
right.
later. Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
And did you expected to see the sharks there, of course?
yes, I was expecting, but that was a little bit more hectic kind of diving. I would say that the cage diving is a little, although it feels like a washing machine, the other one was a little bit more hectic, is more dynamic. You kind of like follow the bait balls. And then for those that don't know, the sardine runs is basically you follow these giant groups of sardines that are being attacked from above, below, and everywhere. There's birds or sharks or dolphins, and they're just like an absolute huge mass of like active hunting. I'm actually looking forward to, we're trying to organize one where we'll be leading this one through South African, obviously, operators who are very familiar with how to do this in 2023. So
because this is part of your new venture, isn't it? New sort of business venture, the liverboard ones. When does that start, Christina?
It's been sitting there for years, thinking about, should I do a liverboard? Because a lot of people come to the island specifically to experience the sharks in the caves. And I would say that Hurricane Dorian was somewhat maybe the first wake-up call. A Dorian, a flood is 75% of the island. We lost quite a lot. And is made me realize that I had all my eggs in one basket. And I literally, somebody came and swapped the basket out of my hands, and it went down on the ground and all the eggs went crash. And so I was like, well, why don't I start to do something that is still has to do with my home and my passion and my knowledge. So our first liverboard has launched for November 12th. And is with Shark Explorers, which is a Bahamian-owned operation. I'm very conscientious of using Bahamian-owned, Bahamian-run, Bahamian provision places, because that's how the money stays in the country and helps protecting sharks. And what we're going to do is a week around the island of Grand Bahama. And it's going to start with doing the dive that I do with my shiver. But instead of being land-based, we're going to be out there. And then from there, we'll navigate west. And on the way, we'll do some unique dive sites. So it's not just shark, is shark with dive sites where there are sharks, but without interacting. Yeah. And then we'll stop at Tiger Beach and do a couple of days at Tiger Beach. And that will be also fulfilled by like shark ecology presentations in the evening, shark behavioral presentations in the evening.
Now, forgive
my ignorance. It's a small catamaran. It's like 8 people. It's like super cozy.
Forgive my ignorance. Tiger Beach, tiger sharks?
Tiger Beach, tiger sharks. It's now the beach is in the middle of the little Bahama bank. But yes, tiger shark dives, watching that interaction on Tiger Beach. There's always a chance to see minimum tiger sharks, bull sharks, Caribbean, lemons, and nurse, and sometimes great hammer. Right. So that's going to be our first trip. And then hopefully expanding it. I have the eyes on a different island in the Bahamas where no one has ever done anything. And I'm thinking about doing a little mix. And the next one will be South Africa with the sardine runs. So,
that'll be splendid.
Expanding, and actually after 20 years of saying, well, I have this, I know it sounds very arrogant to say that, but I have this wealth of knowledge that is not strictly just on this shiver of sharks. It's really about shark behavior. Why not sharing it in a more intimate settings like a liverboard where you have time to sit and discuss and talk and review things?
The area where you dive most often with the sharks, do they actually sort of recognize you? Are they like pets?
No, I would never define, although these are conditioned animals to the presence of humans, wild animals as a pet. There's still like there's a relationship. And yes, I do believe they recognize me. I have people telling me that the sharks do recognize me. I remember I was doing a photo shoot once, and there was like my shark, my shark at the time that I'd saved from a hook that it became very clingy. I was down there just doing something, and all of a sudden she kept swimming by me. It's like, hey, hi. But I do believe they do recognize me. Sharks have 7 senses. A lot of people say, well, how do they recognize, you have the mask and regulator on? And it's like, we don't give them enough credit. Remember, with the 7 senses and a sense of smell, which we don't have underwater, they do.
Yeah.
So the same way my dogs sniff me as soon as I come through the door, and they know if I cheated on them with a different dog, so do the sharks. They do smell our skin. They do work on our hormonal secretions. So each individual, even humans, has a different secretions, that scent, right? That makes people being attracted to each other. It's not the cologne you're using, is a primordial scent. I do believe sharks do detect that.
Yeah. And there was, I know, and hopefully it'll come to fruition soon, but there was the 3rd edition volume of Dining with Divers that Simon Pridmore and I put out, and you kindly contributed both a memorable dive and a great recipe as well. But the memorable dive was about Foggy Eye.
Yes. The story of Foggy
Tell the story of Foggy Eye.
Foggy Eye she's no longer with us, was a Korean reef shark who had been on the shark dive for years. So we catalog the sharks, we take pictures, measure them, and I have a folder, like a little CV for each shark. Name, physical characteristics and measures, how much they grew, how much bigger they got. And Foggy Eye was one of the sharks that will come on the dive and swim underneath my head, come in, touch me, but she will never come in my lap. For those that don't know, I actually kind of like welcome specific individuals in my lap, and they stop swimming and lay down in my lap and I can pet them. But she didn't like that. And it's just like, okay, it's okay. And she showed up on a Monday with a hook on the side. And as she swam by, I just removed the hook. And that was fairly easy. And then on a Thursday of the same week, she showed up, and I could see there was like a giant wire coming out of her mouth. And she kept coming in. It was really bizarre. For the first time, she kept coming into my chest, and I could kind of like put my hand out and open her jaw, and I could see where the hook was. And so in a final attempt or decision, 30 minutes into the dive, I literally shoved my hand down her throat, pulled the hook, and pulled the hook out. And to which she ran away, because obviously, as a crazy woman doing that, I mean, I would run away too. And but after that, she would constantly come in and literally lean into me. And naturally, sharks, when they stop swimming, they sink. But contrary to popular belief, most species have a second ventilation system called buccal pumping, so they can sit there and open and close their mouth. And so I will be down there looking at the sharks that I was working with, and I could feel pressure on my hip, and I'd turn around and I'd be Foggy Eye with her nose against my hip, just tail in the sand, and just sitting there. So I will kneel down and just pet her, and she would like literally come in anytime, every time, just to be pet. And it was just this really switch in behavior that to me was like, even after so many years of working with them, it was again eye-opening, right? So always go down there, be ready to change your mind and your perception, because you never know when you're going to be proven differently of what you believe.
Yeah, that was the most incredible sort of story. And what now, you wear a chainmail suit at times.
I do. At times when I'm working with them, I wear the suit. And I have a lot of people say, well, if they're not dangerous, why you're wearing the suit? And I said, well, I don't wear the suit when I'm not working with them. So I try to compare it to the beekeeper, right? If I'm sitting in the grass amongst daisies and there are bees, which I do when I walk my dog, sometimes we sit down and there's bees going from one flower to the other. I don't need the beekeeper suit. But if I go in the middle of the beehive working with the bees, I'll wear the bee suit, not because the bees are aggressive or mean or anything like that, but in a likely event. Okay. And it's the same thing with the chain suit. I think is a respectful way of working with animals in such a direct contact, so that I protect myself to protect them. So
Yeah.
when I'm doing a regular dive with sharks, when we're diving with them, we're not interacting. I don't wear any suit. When people work with tiger sharks, they don't wear a suit either, because tiger sharks behave differently than Caribbean. But when I work with the Caribbeans and I work on the direct contact, the removing of the hooks, the touching and all that, I wear the suit. If you look at the videos, you'll see the sharks are swimming around me constantly. You don't see the sharks constantly biting.
Yeah.
They never bite, but it's there like a seat belt. You don't drive a car thinking that you're going to slam against the wall every time you put, your hand behind the steering wheel. That might be very expensive in the long run, but you wear a seat belt. And that's the same thing with the chain suit. For me, is the respectful way of interacting with this specific species of sharks in the way that I do interact.
Do you do photography as well?
Yes, I used to have an Iconos 5, and then
Didn't we all? I think mine's up there somewhere.
I was doing really well, and then one day they broke into. I was doing a roommating, so we were like 4 or 5 people. Somebody broke into my room and they took the entire backpack. And at the time, I was working on becoming a cave diving instructor, which was extremely expensive because I had to travel from here to Florida and intern.
Right.
And when they took the entire camera apparatus, I had to pick, because I was a diving profession. I can only make so much money. And all of my money went into training and into buying things. And I stuck with cave diving instructors and never really looked into photography as behind the camera again. And then in 2019, I was like, you know what? It's time for me to do this. And so I returned to photography into the digital world, and starts bringing up my own photography, my own stories, because now I had 25 years of experience of saying, well, I can bring up something that I see that other people don't see the same way. They will not be able to capture in the same essence or in the same way I want to capture. I want a specific pictures of my sharks in that specific way. And it could be the greatest photographer ever, but like, I want to capture them in a certain way because that's the story I want to tell of them. I'm not a professional photographer. I'm a photographer, but like a professional photographer is someone that sells their images for a living, which I don't. But I start bringing up both the stories of the sharks and the caves.
But you've spent an awful lot of time on the other side of the camera, or in front of the camera.
Oh yes.
You've done a lot of that. There's documentaries from the BBC, the Wild, an enormous number.
I don't have the full number, but yes, I've done BBC, National Geographic. I've done a private, what do you call it, like operations that have been featured in places that I don't even know, but like I know I had like film crews from Japan or from Turkey or from Russia coming in. I think one of my favorite ones was obviously BBC Blue Planet Live, where we did like the dive, and then we did a live with Steve Bagshaw on the back of the boat for the world to watch. The other one that was really amazing, I remember I did this program called Bahama Blue, which was like this beautiful story, and it included both sharks and caves, and I was involved in both. Quite a lot of productions where they bring down their own host, and I lead them into this path of discovery. But the number, I don't know, quite a few hundreds, I would say.
God. Now, living in the Bahamas, and you had that terrible sort of hurricane went through, and
it hit our island in Abaco. Living in the Bahamas, when I say Bahamas, everybody thinks of the Paradise side, which by all means, right? It's a beautiful country with this amazing blues and skies and all that. But like any island country has the difficulties of being on an island. And the restrictions of being on an island and outsourcing things. And the hardest part is the hurricanes, yes. Dorian was something unique. I think Dorian has left both in Abaco and Grand Bahama, which were the two islands, had a lot of people, me included, with some PTSD, like some anxiety related to hurricane and storms that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
We prepare, we already started. So what you start doing is when I go to the food store, I buy, six cans of black beans to eat and 6 cans of black beans that go in a pantry. And then we accumulate them. And then when the hurricane season ends in November, we consume them and then we start again.
Yeah.
But it is a life of very much preparedness and adapting, quite a lot of adapting.
And that was your mentor, you said right at the beginning, Ben Rose, your
No,
mentor?
I learned hurricane preparedness. I learned on my own.
But
go through them the first time and go, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what you need after. This is how long the water's not going to be here.
Yeah.
Few suggestions were given by local Bahamians, but then I came up with my own method. I have it down to an art. I literally have down to a T. I have like the hurricane prepare boxes, the amount of containers that I fill with fresh water before the hurricane comes, so I can flush the toilet, I can give water to my pups, I can have water for me. It's down to a T. And is actually none of it is last minute. Is like, good old cave diver is I prepare months in advance. So when the storm hits, all I have to do is close the windows and just sit there and wait.
Christina, we are
At
right
the
at the end
time.
of the time. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm sorry, we could carry on for another couple of hours at least like this. So therefore, I do look forward to the day when we can do it over a beer or 10 and do
Let's
it
do
live. But Christina,
I would love
personally, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. So over to you, Cushy.
Hi guys, I'm back. So I like to thank both of you for taking your time today to join us. And really thank you, David, for hosting the session, as well as Christina. I love all your stories and experiences. We hope to see you both physically at the September 8X show happening this year.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Me
Cushy.
So for our viewers, if you guys have any questions, you can just drop them on our Facebook page and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And thank you once again, both David and Christina, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, and the session will be recorded, I take it.
Yes, it will be on
Excellent.
Facebook.
Okay, Cushy,
Thank
thank you. Christina, thank you. And look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.